Go.
All right. Well, welcome to the fourth and final class of Gender, Judaism, and You, taught by me. And we're going to spend the first part of our class today learning a few midrashim about the daughters of Zelophachad. And then we're going to go into, I think, two groups. So we won't go into dyads, but half the group will be in one group, half will be in another. And our task for probably a half an hour will be to co-construct a midrash with the rest of the folks in our group. And the questions that I sent to you at our last week's class for thought, food for thought, will hopefully help you create something. But the first half hour will also hopefully help you create something because you'll get a sense of what our sages have had to say. So and after we create our midrashim, we're going to share them with each other. So one of your tasks in your small group will be to decide if you're going to have one person share the midrash, or if you're going to be like a Greek chorus and share your midrash collectively. All right. So everyone clear on their flow for tonight? Nod your head if you're clear on the flow for tonight. Raise your hand if you have a question. All right. So I'm going to start with a melody from Psalm 92, the Psalm for Shabbat, one of the several shul tunes for Tzaddik Katamar. And I'll put that up on the screen so you have the words to sing along. And the reason I chose to start our time together with that is because one of the midrashim, the first one we're going to work with, which is Bava Batra 119b. I'll put that up on the screen too when we get there. Starts with Tana. It was taught. Banot Zelophachad Hachaminiot Hein. Derashaniot Hein. Tzadikinot Hein. They were. The daughters of Zelophachad were exceedingly wise, knew well how to expound upon scripture, and were perfectly righteous. So together, I'm going to get the screen share going. All right. Do you see the text? Sadiq Katamar? All right, excellent. I'm going to scroll up a little so we have both the English translation there too. So just imagine in your mind's eye a group of women in the wilderness, dressed as you imagine maybe we were dressed, the Hebrews, in our 40-year journey. Coming before a council of elders to make a case for something that had never been done before. These women who our sages describe as wise and learned and righteous, as we sing this. Tzadikata Amar Yifrach Perez Balvanom Yezgeh Shetulim Beveit Adonai Lechatrot Eloheinu Yafrichu Od Yenuvun Beseva Deshenim Varananim Yehu Lehagid Ki Yashar Adonai Tzori Velo Avlatabo. And we're going to start, we've been ending with Kaddish de Rabbanan, which is the Kaddish for studying Torah. And we still will tonight, but we'll also start with a snippet from it, which I think I mentioned one of the weeks before. This was composed by one of Rabbi Sheffa Gold's students, and it goes like this. Talmidei hon, v'al kol talmidei hon, al Rabbanan v'al talmidei hon, v'al kol talmidei hon, al Rabbanan v'al talmidei hon, v'al kol talmidei Talmidei Hom. So I just want to ask, I want to check, does everyone have your list of questions for later? Ready, handy? No. Did anyone open it up when it was sent out? One person. All right, we're going to have a lot of fun in these small groups without having done any reflection, but that'll be what it is. Devorah, were you waving your hand? No.
I haven't.
Okay, you have it. It's going to be a challenge. When we break into groups, if you don't have it in front of you. So I'm actually going to ask everybody to take a moment and see if you can find the email that Mark sent out with the homework, or for my crew, the email that I sent out with the link. So we'll just set ourselves up for that.
It's in the Moshe newsletter for those of you who got that.
Right.
And it's in a gray line amongst the other colors.
Um, all right. And I'm putting it into the chat right now. So I guess it means only Devorah perhaps might have a thought about the story of the Daughters of Zelophachad, because you're the only one who checked out the material. So I was going to ask before I start in with the Midrash if anybody has anything they wanted to share upon just reading the basic Torah text. Do you want to take a look at that now and have it now? Good, Batya. I'm glad to know that. Thank you. All right, I'll just teach. I love to be participatory. Devorah, yes?
Well, I wasn't going to talk a lot tonight because I did more than my share last time. But since nobody else was talking, I would just like to say that when I learned about this a few years ago, I was shocked that there were actually these sisters who were the heirs but weren't male, so they weren't entitled to it, and what they did in order to be allowed to have the inheritance of their family. I didn't know there was good stuff like this in the Torah.
Pretty heady stuff. So what I'm going to do, because I think we all have to be on the same page, I'm going to put this up, and somebody's going to read it before we get into the Midrash, because I just don't think that we can move forward with Midrash before we have the text in our brains. So would somebody like to volunteer to read? Or should I call on someone? Batya, would you read for us?
Then drew near the daughters of Zelophachad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. And these are the names of his daughters: Mala, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moses, and before Eleazar the priest, and before the princes and all the congregation at the door of the tent of meeting, saying, Our father died in the wilderness, and he was not among the company of them that gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but he died in his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be done away from among his family because he had no son? Give unto us a possession among the brethren of our father. And Moses brought their cause before the Lord. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, The daughters of Zelophachad speak right. Thou shalt surely give them a possession of an inheritance among their father's brethren, and thou shalt cause the inheritance of their father to pass to them.
Excellent. I'm going to take 2 or 3 off the top of your head responses. What do you make of that? How does it make you feel? How do you think it could be, Mary Rita?
I love this reading, and I love these daughters because they have the courage and they have the audacity to really ask for what is a rightful place for them, and to keep the name of their family and of their father alive.
Indeed. Thank you. Are you all right? Shams.
Yes, I aspirate.
Shams.
Hey, I just wanted to say I did actually read this the other day. I'm just in my car and it's not super easy to participate. But so when I read it, I thought, this is awesome, and it's totally a one-off. Like, it'll just never happen again, or like, I just kind of like, that's cool, but then I like, nobody ever does that. So that was kind of my reaction was, I'm glad that happened once.
Well, I'm so glad that we're going to be looking at Midrash and, Talmudic text, so you can see that it didn't just happen and blip and disappear into vapor. Steve, you're on mute, Steve?
Yes, I am. Oh boy, how do I unmute?
You're here. You're good now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I feel the other way. I think this is precedent, and this could be used by anyone. And I mean, it's in numbers. It's there.
Can't take it away from us. Well, let's
Right.
take a look at what our sages have to say. Rabbi Mark.
Oh, I just want to say that in the history of the world, men have never known what to do about powerful women. And so Moshe, he can't make a decision by himself, so he got to go to God.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
So I think that there haven't been very many. That one of our midrashim does address that a little bit, a tiny little bit, but I think that's ripe for exploration. Why don't Moses and the elders just like respond? It's their job. Why do they have to go back to God? Well, let's take a look at what our sages have done with this. And I'm going to share one midrash at a time, and we'll have a little conversation about each. Bava Batra, as we already started with, the daughters of Zelophachad were exceedingly wise, knew well how to expound scripture, and were perfectly righteous. They were exceedingly wise since they chose to speak at the right time. For just then, Moshe, our teacher, was engaged in interpreting this section on Levirate marriage. So they said, if in Levirate marriage our status is like that of sons, for example, it's only relevant if a father dies without sons or daughters, then give us like a son a possession in the land. Like, oh my God, are there any lawyers in the house? This is such fantastic legal reasoning. All right. If not, then our mother should be subjected to a Levirate marriage. And at once Moses brought their cause before the Lord. The daughters also knew well how to expound scripture, learned from Torah, for they said, if our father had a son, we would not have spoken, or even if that son had a daughter, we would not have spoken. They were perfectly virtuous, since they married only men who were worthy of them. Now, wow! Now, what I love many things about this. One of them is that the rabbis just made shit up. It's like, who did they marry? How did we know they were worthy of them? Like they just made that up. And I love that because they wanted to make it clear that this was not a one-off, the daughters, if you are wise and if you are learned and if you are righteous, it doesn't matter who you are. The case you make, that's how our tradition works. Make the case, baby, make the case. So as an attorney, that makes my little heart sing. Scott.
So what happens to their property when they get married?
Who does it pass to? Well, we don't know if they have sons and if it passes to them, but presumably if they have sons, it passes to them. And then
Right, but before that, would their husbands have some say over it?
Would their husbands have say over? Well, they would jointly manage the property. Could the husband sell it without their wives' permission? I would say no, because it belongs to the wives, if that's the question. Yeah. So that it didn't like forever change the lineage of transmission to girls or girl children, whatever. But yeah. I think it just meant it didn't go to their cousins, their uncles' sons. Great question. Anybody else? And you could say anything about this. You could ask a question like Scott did about the application, or just like rant and rave if something feels uncomfortable, or glow if something feels great. And if I don't see any hands, I'll move quickly. Mary Rita? Yeah.
What really, I was listening to what you just said, Scott, and I just went back to double check, but I was pretty sure that Moses took the question to the Lord. And so that's like going even higher than the Supreme Court, so like
Even higher.
much, much higher. So how could anybody, let's say their husband's question, this feels like it's like written in gold that could not be erased at all.
Not only that, we're not getting into this, but there's a text, I'm sorry, I don't know chapter and verse in Devarim, that says that Torah shall not be added to or subtracted from. But duh, it was changed. Torah was changed in this text. So it's contradicting that Devarim text, which I think so Daughters of Zelophachad is not just a great feminist reading, it's also like the source proof text for Jewish renewal. Like, we can do things differently. Look, if we're righteous and we are learned and we are like sincere and pious and la 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 la, it is okay if we are aligned. If, as Reb Zalman Zichrono Livracha would say, if we are backwards compatible, right? We can change things. All right. Next, thank you. Chapter 4, verse 2. Next midrash. Tanhuma Pinchas, 8-9. Reb Shimon ben Lakish differed. Moshe, our teacher, did not know this law. But first, the women came before the chiefs of tens, who said, this being a case concerning inheritance, it's not our jurisdiction. It belongs to our superiors. And then the women came to the chiefs of 50s, who, seeing the chiefs of tens had shown them deference, said, we too have those who are superior to us in knowledge. And a like reply was given by the chiefs of hundreds, the chiefs of thousands, and the princes. So the daughters of Zelophachad went to Eleazar, who told them, there is Moses, our teacher, go to him. And when Moshe realized that every dignitary, from the tens to the 50s to the hundreds to the thousands, and to the princes, had shown deference to his superior, he said, if I tell them the law, I shall be snatching eminence not properly mine. So this is one answer, Rabbi Mark, to your question. So Moshe said, I too have a superior, and that's why Moshe brought their cause to the Lord. So what do you make of this? That the daughters basically, in American jurisprudential terms, they went through the court system. First, they went to the district court, and then they went to the Court of Appeals, and then they went to the Supreme Court. They didn't try to finagle the system, or I don't know, they didn't try to bypass anything, right? So what are the implications of that? Living in the world we're living today, I'm like, wow, that does show they're righteous, right? They're not trying to like appoint their own judges and then forum shop is the term, go to the jurisdiction where they think they're going to have the best hearing. They went through the proper chains. And that so impressed Moshe that he also thought he would go up the chain of command to God. Any other thoughts about what this might be about and how it might reflect on the daughters? Yes, Scott. Are you a lawyer, Scott?
I was in the past. How did you know that, Rabbi Deb?
I just, you're here. You're here with me. You're here with me right now. I love it.
Yeah, kind of sound like the rabbis are trying, I don't mean to say it this way, but they're confounded by why Moshe didn't know. So they make up this little nice story, which, yeah, also has the implications you said, but to give him some like support, or because it's not very often that he does that, if ever, right? I mean, supposedly God told him everything he needed to know, right?
Right. I mean, he usually goes to God for like moral support. Like, oh, I can't talk to Pharaoh, and like, yeah, you got Aaron, I'm with you. I'll send some plagues, you're fine. But not for jurisprudential advice. That's right. That's right. Maybe it was to find a reason why Moshe would do that. Dvorah, you're not a lawyer, are you? Dvorah.
No, that's not one of the things I've ever done.
Carry on.
Um, so you talked about the tens and the 50s and the hundreds. Are those levels of judges or levels of like court?
Yeah. Well, deciders, Moshe was advised by Yitro to appoint a council of 70 elders, but once there were, a million plus in the wilderness and it was like just too much to handle. Yeah, it was.
Okay. I didn't notice that before, so thank you.
Yeah. Renee.
I was just thinking that maybe Moses went to God because he was thinking, if I make this decision, everybody else has pushed the decision off because they don't want to make it. If God makes the decision, no one can question that it's the right decision.
Yeah. I think it was really savvy. I think Moses was really savvy that it was such a radical shift from the law that had come down, that he wanted it to be sealed. He wanted the deal sealed. I think that's really astute.
Moses can't add to the Torah, but God could.
But God can. That's interesting. Actually, but now we don't have God because there's Lo B'Shamayim. It's not in heaven anymore, right? It was given to the sages. And so at this point, if you're not an Orthodox Jew going to the rabbi to make decisions, to paskin your question, who are the deciders? We are the deciders together collectively. All right. I'm going to go into the next. I have several more, so I'm going to go on to the next one. Sifra, Numbers 133. Then drew near the daughters of Zelophachad. When the daughters of Zelophachad heard that the land was about to be divided among the tribes, but only for males, not for females, they gathered to take counsel. They decided that the mercies of flesh and blood, meaning humans, are not like the mercies of him, forgive the misgendering of God, not like the mercies of them who is everywhere. So the way humans do mercy is not the way Yah does mercy. Flesh and blood is apt to be more merciful to males than females. But Yah, who spoke and the world came into being, is different. Yah's mercies are for males as well as females. Yah's mercies are for all. The Lord is good to all, and Yah's tender mercies are over all Yah's works, from Psalm 145, verse 9.
Tov Adonai lakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav.
So what do you think of that, Scott?
So you said flesh and blood referred to people, but reading on, it seems to refer to men.
Well, they're assuming that the deciders are men.
Mankind, because it says that they give stuff to other men and not to women. Which, if it really meant people, if it meant everybody, at least in the mind of the rabbis or whoever wrote that, he wouldn't have said it that way.
Although it's interesting because so frequently, the plural is masculine, but here they chose to say flesh and blood as opposed to, yeah, so it's very interesting, their choice. Mary Rita?
This sounds for me, this sounds very close to what actually is in Numbers, in Torah, because it's linking God with the allness, that it's not, it's the flesh and blood of the people who focus more on, it's the males who should be given the right of the inheritance. So I think these people are savvy for writing this,
Shamati, I hear you. I want to hand over midrash that I was going to do in a different class, so didn't get to, but it actually is great to have it here. And mostly I want to hand this over right now because one of the characters that I'm asking you to explore questions around for the midrash you're about to create is God, is Yah. So here's a little insight into the brain of Yah. Hold on a second. And I alluded to this in one of our previous classes, but now we'll read it. Chulin 60b to 4, the sun and the moon, two great lights. Rabbi Shimon ben Patzi raised a contradiction. It's written, and Yah made the two great lights. That's in Breshit, chapter 1, verse 16. And it is written, the great light to rule the day, and the small light to rule the night. Same verse. The moon, and here's a conversation that the sages imagined. The moon said to Yah, Master of the universe, is it possible for two kings to serve with one crown? And God said to the moon, if so, go and diminish yourself. The moon said to God, Master of the universe, how can it be that because I said a correct statement before you, I should diminish myself? This sounds like retaliatory, for being smart. That's not cool. God said to the moon, if so, go and rule during the day and during the night. And the moon said to God, what gain is there to shining at daytime? What use is a candle in the middle of the day? God said to the moon, go and see your greatness. Let the Jewish people count the days and years with you. And the moon said to God, but they're going to count by day. It's impossible that they won't count seasons with it, as it's written, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And God said to the moon, go and see your greatness. Let righteous men be named after you, just as you are called the small light. Others are similarly named, such as Yaakov HaKatan, example, Jacob, our forefather, and Shmuel HaKatan. HaKatan is the small one. And David HaKatan. God saw that the moon was not comforted. Now, here's the really groovy part. The Kuchabrichu says, bring atonement for me, since I diminished the moon. So God is really, in my view, rude and inappropriate to a very smart moon. And God keeps doing it over and over and over again. And finally, God realizes the error of God's ways and says, bring atonement for me. And the Gemara notes, and this is what Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, what's different about the goat offering of the new moon? That it is stated with regard to it for the Lord. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, this goat shall be an atonement for me for having diminished the size of the moon. If it isn't obvious, the sun in our tradition represents maleness, masculinity, and the moon represents femaleness, femininity. So what do you make of that? Yes, Bacha.
I first heard this in my introduction to Kabbalah, and I was so angry that the feminine has to be less than, that I almost stopped reading the book. And some people, this was in Reb Naj's wisdom class, and some people did stop reading the book. They were so angry. So I just got all those emotions as soon as you started reading it.
Well, I understand and appreciate why it would be triggering, and I'm sorry to hear that. There's a number of additional midrashim, and there's even some text in Isaiah that one could say that are somewhat curative of this. In Isaiah, there's Shemot Rabbah 15:21 lists out several texts. Behold. Isaiah 42:9. Behold, the former have come to pass, and the new I declare. Is there anything new in the future? It says in Ecclesiastes, it is not written what was, that is, what will be. Rather, we find that there are 10 things the Holy One blessed be he. I am sorry for all the he's is destined to introduce in the future. The first is that Yah is destined to illuminate the world, as it is said. The sun will no longer be for you the light of day, and the glow of the moon will not illuminate for you. The Lord will be your eternal light, and God will be your glory. So in the future, there is not this distinction. And there's another piece that says the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun. It also says the light of the sun shall be sevenfold. So
But
it's
isn't
not clear if that means that the moon gets to be what the sun used to be and the sun is 7 times, or they're both greatly expanded. Mary Rita?
But I'm trying to think, like, when I read this or read a version of this, I thought it also talks about that the moon like is a reflection of the sun's light. So there is that diminishment there. If it's not this, if it's not like shining all the time, then it's also getting its light from the sun. And that also, you know, for me, like also diminished the moon.
I hear what everyone's saying, and yet the fact that Yah does tshuva for having done this says to me that this is what it is and it's wrong. And that does, so we shouldn't like look to it and say, oh, this is the intention. Oh, this is what it should be for eternity. Oh, this is, evidence of men ruling over women. To me, it's like, yeah, God did this and God admits that God messed up. Devorah and then Scott.
Well, the sun is just there. And it's not, the moon is the delineator for months, and it's followed through the 4 quarters or through every day, really, but for the 4 quarters. So in the end, the moon has a lot more active participation in our life than the sun does, I think, in that sense. Or we have more interaction with it actively than the sun.
It helps us understand the passing of time in a way that the sun does not. And so when God says, the days and the weeks will be counted by you to the moon, and the moon rejects that, but it is actually true. It is actually
before we put it in a calendar, they had to have witnesses to the moon.
That's right.
order to know when the new month started. So that became pretty significant.
Not only that, but the moon controls the tides.
Yeah, and in some like in Celtic culture, they count like the festivals from the full moon because they really want to be sure that the people can see it, and not the new moon. And so that they have a wheel of time, and it's a lot. It's what you said, Devor. It's not just it's the equinox, and it's the solstice, and it's all the major festivals.
All right, we've got Scott, and it's either Shosh or Ma. It is Shosh. All right, Scott and then Shosh.
Yeah, why does it have to be a competition? It shouldn't have been a competition. I mean, if you start counting, yeah, the sun does a lot of good things. We need the sun, photosynthesis, all this stuff. But the sun is also a very violent place. You can't look at the sun burns you. It's not all good. And the moon is beautiful. You can look at the moon, it has a face, it does all the things that we all have been saying. So, it's not it shouldn't be looked at, yeah, small and big, but does size matter? It's not really about that.
I love that, Scott. I love it. I love it. It's like, why am I? I mean, I'm convicted, as some might say, like, yeah, why do I need the sun to be the same? Like, why can't it just be beautiful and different? Sun as the moon, just as with genders. All right. There are several people with their hands up, and so I am going to tell you the cue so you can be calm and put your hand down. Shosh, and then Batya, and then Steve. And if anyone else wants to speak, use your electronic hand. So Shosh, and then Batya and Steve.
Two things. One, I find it curious, and I'm feeling it a little bit myself. I'm a little bit familiar with this midrash. That we're all being so defensive about the poor moon, that we're kind of trying to rationalize. Yeah, but the moon does the tides and the moon does the sea, and so forth. And we're all getting like behind the moon here. And that's one thing, just an observation. And the other sort of hit me that I think this implicitly, just the way, God's doing a little tochacha for what God did here, implicitly says the presumption is that God is male in this. I can't perceive a Shekhinah doing this thing and doing the tochacha. I think it's implicit and we're just so used to it that we don't even realize it. But this is not I like to think of God as the ultimate, non-binary creature in the world. And I don't see a non-binary creature here. I see a male making these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Interesting. Although, I mean, it's in the same midrash that Kuchabrihu has this disconcerting conversation with the moon and then recognizes the error of their ways. So it's not tochacha, it's tshuva.
And not tochacha, but tshuva even. But I'm just saying, I'm still perceiving God as male in this whole story.
Got it. I don't, but I hear why you do.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, gotcha.
Well, regardless of what we can say of who does what, it was the word diminishes, that the moon diminishes itself, that got me going.
Yeah.
And was so disturbing to me.
Yeah. Shamati. Steve, you're on mute.
I'm reading this in a different way. I'm reading at the beginning, God is saying, well, look at the reality of things. Men rule things in this society. And the moon is really smart. And the moon is really, I mean, has great wisdom, has great audacity, and says, well, that shouldn't be. That's not right. And God's saying, well, that's the way it is. And then the moon's saying, no, it doesn't have to be that way. Listen, I have rights too. And God's saying, oh, yeah. So I'm not sure if God is male or female in this. I think God is just stating the way things are, that men, really rule things. And it's not necessarily the way it has to be.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Devorah, I see your hand up, but I want to move on. And I've got some teaching of my own that I want to lift up. And then I want to get you into your small groups or half groups, whatever, so you can create. Because the point of this particular midrash was for you to put yourself into the mind of God, so I don't want to take the whole rest of the class in that, which is quite an audacious thing, isn't it? All right, so this is my midrash about what's going on with the Daughters of Zelophachad, and I'll put it on the share screen. I haven't seen this, by the way, in any Talmudic text or Agadic text. But I was doing a drash on Korach, and I was like, they hate, the sages hate what Korach did. And they said it was, a dispute that was lo l'shem shamayim, not for the sake of heaven. And I'm like, but they love what the Daughters of Zelophachad did. So I'm like, how are they different? So I explored that. So the Torah says of Korach and his crew, vayakumu, and it's always translated, they rose up, not just they arose. They rose up. Vayikahalu al, and they gathered against. Kahal is, gathering, community gathering. And they gathered against. And they made an accusation. Rav lachem, you have too much. This is how they approached Moses. But the daughters, they use different words, different verbs. Vatikravna, kerev. They came close. They approached. They got near. Vata'amodna lifnei, and they stood before. Hear the difference? They approached. They didn't rise up. They stood before. They didn't gather against. And how did they speak? They didn't make a charge. You did this. They weren't blaming. They told a story. Our father died in the wilderness. And listen to this. He wasn't in Korach's band. I loved that. My curiosity about the difference between them. They're actually tied in the text, right? He wasn't, he wasn't a rabble rouser. He wasn't trying to make trouble. And they didn't confront or blame. They asked a question. Why should his name be omitted from his family? Because he didn't have a son. So they spoke with compassion in their story, as opposed to attacking the rule or attacking Moses. All right. So for me, Yah saw this happening. I guess the part that makes this a midrash is Yah saw the daughters behaving this way and said, my daughters are showing the way. They've learned more than could have ever taught them. Follow the women and the people will thrive. So I wanted to close with that to give you a sense that everyone in this box, everyone in these Hollywood squares is just as empowered as any Rav, as any sage, as anyone that you read about to create a story about what happened. So I put into the chat the HT, if you scroll up above what Bacha wrote, files, constantcontact.com. Hopefully you can access it if you don't already have the story of the Daughters of Zelophachad themselves, and then all the questions. So I want you to take a look at that. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. And then we're just going to split up into two groups. So Mark, you could just split us up randomly and include me, and you can include yourself if you like. It will be slightly uneven because there's 13 of us, so there'll be a 6 and 7. And you'll see that there are 5 different characters that I want you to explore. So I'm going to actually give 5 minutes.
All right, I've been busy, Reb Deb, so I'm going to bring us back with this. Five sisters stood, a voice unheard, in a world where land was a man's word. Zelophachad gone, their father's name would vanish, lost to tribal flame. The daughters of Zelophachad. The daughters of Zelophachad. But they did not weep, nor did they hide, but marched before the leaders side by side. Our father's land, our rightful claim, they cried. Let not his memory be tame. The daughters of Zelophachad. The daughters of Zelophachad. Moses listened, God heard their plea, and justice bloomed for them to see. The land was theirs, a heritage true, a testament to voices bold and new. The daughters of Zelophachad. 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 The daughters of Zelophachad.
Holy moly, did you do your own midrash or was that your report out from your group?
I did my own with the help of AI.
Amazing. Holy moly. Well, I hope we have a reporter from our group. Scott is going to report for our group. I hope the other group has a reporter too. Great, Mary Rita. But I'm just sorry to say nobody will top what Rabbi Mark just did because that was awesome. Awesome. So we're just going to have to live with that reality. So Scott or Mary Rita, who wants to go first?
That was a hard act to follow.
Right.
But I don't mind. I'll go.
Great.
That's good.
So
We want to end with a bang.
Are you the bang? Good. So we talked a lot about what was Yah thinking. And the last question, what is the grand plan? Is there a grand plan? And we went all the way back to the beginning. And in the beginning, God was kind of lonely and created this human. And this human was non-binary. And Yah thought that they would live happily ever after. But then the humans started complaining that they needed a companion. And all the animals were kind of making a mess in the house. So Yah had no choice but to divide them. And that's when it all began. So did Yah really have a plan, or was Yah just sort of making it up as God went along all those centuries? Now, Yah realized that to have a people, God had to talk to Abraham and not Sarah, because no one would have listened to Sarah, because by then people had decided that women didn't know what they were talking about. We didn't say that. I should make it up. But, the society was such that the men were in charge. So Yah needed to talk to the men. And that went on for a long time. But there must have been something in God's mind going back to the beginning that things were supposed to be more even. But, people are stubborn and they wouldn't accept that all at once. So as time went on, God thought, I need to take this slow. I need to take this slow. And then these brave women came along, and what they did was very daring, as we know. And they did it very politely and went all the way up the line. And we don't exactly know what Moshe was thinking. We kind of hoped that Moshe thought, they got a point, but wasn't sure the people would take it, so needed some backup. Went back to God. God said, yeah, that's what I was thinking all along. And that was good. It was a rule for a certain circumstance where there were only daughters and no sons. It really didn't help families with various types of siblings, because the sons would still inherit. But it was a start. It was a start. And from there, it was kind of in people's hands, and people mess up and people make progress and take 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards and sometimes more forward. And eventually Yah just said, okay, you all figure it out. It's not in heaven anymore. It's in your hearts, and that's where it's going to be. And so it's for us. And over time, things have changed. Certainly here where we live, everybody inherits equally, and then they fight about it, but that's another issue. And in other places, that's not the case. So there's still plan, if that indeed is Yah's plan, which we hope for still work to be done. Thank you.
Talk about half of that. Scott, you're brilliant. Scott took this, well, it wasn't disjointed, but just, we were answering the questions that were on the sheet. That was amazing. We bow to you, Scott. Thank you for representing us. Mary Rita.
The Daughters of Zelophachad. We started in what was going on inside of them. And it was a sad time because their father had just died. And they so wanted the name of their family to continue. And as they were talking, they went back to the beginning. There was nothing written down in Torah at this point, but these 5 daughters, these young women, were part of the women and the oral Torah and their stories that had been handed down. Miriam would have been really proud of them. And they went back to that very beginning, that people were created. They were created male and female. They were created. And there was that equality. And there wasn't, well, only the men are going to have the property. And they were also, as they were planning on what they were going to do, they felt so empowered and they were calm. And in the meantime, up in the heavens, Yah. Now I think Shahina was around at that time too. I know the Kabbalah was not there, but she was there, or they were there, and were feeling that there needed to be a space opened up because something new was going to be created. And just as that in the beginning with the creation, God just was longing for this relationship with humans. There was an opening, not like the opening for Korach, where they all went under the earth, because as these daughters came forward, what they were asking for, and they felt very calm and empowered to do it, they were asking for what was their right. And they knew that God knew it was their right, and that God was maybe thinking that God had screwed it up in somehow these customs that had happened. And so they came with great empowerment, and they each spoke. They each spoke because they did not want one to look like she was more empowered than the other. And they were courageous, and while they were waiting, they talked to Yah, and they told Yah what was going on. They were talking to Yah all along, and Yah said to them, "It's in your heart, and take it forward." And so just imagine, we are in the present, and the daughters of Zelophachad are with us, and they are helping us to open up the space so that we can help people that are all around us open up a space in their hearts so that diversity and equality and inclusiveness is not something that is being erased, but something that we will be able to spread, and that we will be able, starting with us. And the daughter said, we'll be here to help you, that in the hearts of all the people will become hearts of flesh rather than hardened hearts. And with these hearts of flesh, we will be able to have the possibility of a growing DEI and room for people of all kind, of all genders, or binary or non-binary, and that we will go forward with this from this day on. And we will say, dear one, prepare us to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving,
Everybody join in.
will be a living sanctuary with hearts that are going to just be so filled with love that it will have that equality that was there from the very beginning that we just couldn't see. Sanctuary for you.
Oh my God. Before we finish that, I was going to close out with, we are the champions, my friends.
Okay, we can do
That's
that
the
too.
energy I was getting.